We've got a lively group in the room already, so I'm gonna go live. It's 5 minutes to the top of the hour, as we like to say in radio. But John Doe is here, Artie, AJ, Scott, DePaul, Stub Writer, computers, cats, and more. I thought the set was an actual room, not a wall in a giant room. Well, it used to be in a smaller room, now it's in a bigger room. But videos by Al, how you doing? A hand in it, Flo. William Page from Odessa, M. Kolba, greets from Milwaukee, greets. I appreciate that, my friends. Hello from Chapel Hill, Chapel Hill. Videos by Al, asked about Haggerty. We have 3 with Haggerty, just wondering. Haggerty, and this is not a plug or anything, but they are the ones that I have insuring my 2 nice cars, my Viper and my Cobra. I've never had to file a claim, but I know when I talk to them, when I've gotten insurance and so on, very, very helpful people. I liked my experience with them so far. Cowboy Butler, good afternoon. Bob Summers, hello from Norman, Oklahoma. Have you ever had Michigan sauce? I'm not sure what that is. Never heard that before. Lowell Rigsium, hello. I got here early, and that's why we started early, because you were here. Jake Line, good noon, Steve. In the East, it's actually approaching 1 o'clock, but I don't care where you are. Adventures with Crit starts with what's up with the chair. We'll talk about that in a second. But if everything goes according to plan today, the Canadian robot lady will be joining us, and I think the gang will all be here, as I like to say. Gilbert, yo, Steve. Gilbert's one of my favorite commenters because she apparently has all kinds of inside information on stuff that happened in Michigan when I was growing up there in my old neighborhood. And we talked last week about Roy's Ranch, riding the Shetland ponies. Joby, hey, look at Steve Lehto. People say, hey, look at Steve Lehto. Jonesboro, Tennessee, Chuck Whitehead, good afternoon from. I appreciate that. Goat Bonnie, hello. Breaking Boardrooms, hey. Connor Thomas, the flexi spot. Yeah, it's the chair I'm sitting on right now is a flexi spot chair. But we're talking, of course, about the other one back here. Robert Torres says Superbird of Daytona. I like the Daytona better myself. I think the lines are better. It's also a little less common, but I've always liked the Daytona myself. Don Studnicka, do you still have your M35? No, I do not. I sold it a few years ago. I had no place really to use it. Wasn't using it as much as I would have liked. I kind of wish I had it now, but you know, I can always go out and get another one. But I got one and I cleaned it up really, really well. Put different seats in it. Put a diamond plate box in the back for stuff. And I had a lot of fun with that thing. I used to take it up north and run stuff over with it. So Lowell Rigsium says, in the West, we have fry sauce. It's kind of spiced up version of ketchup and mayo. Okay. Taz 1669. Hi, Steve. Love the show. Amazing. If the Canadian ladies on, can't wait. Best wishes from Scotland. Scotland. I appreciate that. G Keyman 565. Steve Live. Have a great day. I'll be listening hands free while driving, and my license is good. I hope so. Mr. Landfill, Michigan hot dog, Michigan Red Hot, or simply Michigan, is a steamed all beef hot dog on a steamed bun topped with a meaty sauce, generally referred to as a Michigan sauce. I've never heard, I've heard of a Michigan hot dog. I've heard of Coney's. I've never heard of it called the Michigan sauce before. I didn't think there's anything specific to Michigan about it, but I could be wrong. Fast Eddie 333 says a Superbird would be my choice. Are you just a Plymouth guy, or are you just trying to argue? The cars are very similar. Interestingly, they did come slightly equipped differently. And I've got those words in the wrong order, but I'm not going to go back and change them because I can't. But you could get a Superbird, for instance, with a 6-pack, which you could not get on the Daytona. But they're both available with Hemis, so who cares? Susan James, hi, Steve-O. Steve-O. VSPO36, Red Eye Hellcat. Craig Snyder, hey, Steve, big fan here from Bellingham, Washington. I'm guessing it's Bellingham, not Bellingham. Don Studnicka, I had an M45 fire truck. Yeah, they make all these really cool variants. A friend of mine had one of those weapons carriers. It's an M37, the smaller one. He had a plow on, he snowplowed with it, but mine was just a troop carrier. It had a winch. Not all of them have winches. It did not have the turbo engine. Not all of them have turbos. But Lowell Riggs says, a man with one watch knows what time it is. A man with 2 watches never knows. Tim Nossum, do you go to Brooklyn, Michigan to watch NASCAR? I never have. I always forget that it's there. I mean, once in a while I'll see a race. Oh, that's right. We have a NASCAR track in Michigan, but it's kind of a hike. It's kind of over here. And they do NASCAR and they also do the Indy cars there as well. But I have not done it. Mark Sparks, do you still have camouflaged railroad spikes? I'm not sure I ever did. Although my neighbor used to throw them at me for some weird reason. By the way, I drove past that house yesterday. And it's so funny because the person who bought my house so clearly has had it with him. They built this monstrosity of a garage between their house and his house. And then they knocked down the hedge that was disputed and they put in a fence line right on the line. I guarantee, and I never met the people. I guarantee you, they got one bad visit from that guy, and he said, "Screw it, we're done with this. We're done with this." Hidden Tomatoes says, "What about the chair?" Okay, so here's the deal. There's a chair right there, and I had a white folding chair there for quite some time, and people would come on and go, "Steve, what's with that white folding? You got to be able to get a better chair than that." And I mentioned I want to have a chair that doesn't move around, you know. So I can't use this chair on camera. And I was actually driving by a garage sale. I'm not kidding you. And I saw that chair and a bunch of stuff on someone's, in someone's driveway. I got out of my car and I walked up to it and I look at the chair and it has a price on it for $5. Five. I said to the woman, $5? She goes, yeah. I flipped her a 5, brought it in there, put it there. The problem is it creaks. So I've shot a video with it already, but I'm worried that anytime I shift, it creaks. And if the creaks show up on camera with the microphone, I might have an issue. But if they're not, then I'm fine because it'll encourage me to not bob and weave so much while I'm talking. Oh, boy. Gilbert's NASCAR school went all the time. My neighbor was Walt Zarnecki. Yeah, believe it or not, I've not been to any NASCAR races. I went to a bunch of stock car races when I was younger. I had an uncle who raced USAC when I was really little, but haven't been to a NASCAR race because modern NASCAR doesn't do it for me. So, Kazooie Trisha, oh no, I'm 5 minutes late. I come in at the end of a fence story. I was just joking about the guy who owns my old house next door to the guy who used to mow my lawn, thinking it was his. And it bugged me. Reinhard Man says you can oil the chair. I'm not sure. I'm worried that it's creaking in a structural way. Kind of like when George asks a dentist, should your teeth make noise like whistling or chirping? Implying that his did. Steve Ladders' glue is cheap. Earthbound Misfit WD-40. Mindbend suggests it might be a haunted chair. A haunted chair. David Peterson says $5. Yeah, that's the thing. For $5, how can you not buy that chair? I mean, it's a functional chair for $5. So Dan says my hearing is so bad, I'm lucky I can even hear you. Connor Thomas says I know not to buy an RV, but is a pop-up camper okay? Okay, understand two things. One is that all RVs, pop-ups, tow-behinds, whatever they might be, fifth wheels, toy haulers, those are all in the same category of expensive things that are not covered by the Lemon Law in most states. So if you buy a pop-up camper, my advice still stands. You should probably try renting one or buy one used. Let someone else take the depreciation on it. So many people buy one of those things and decide it's not for them. And you can actually find these things that were used one time or two. Gilbert says Walt ran the track for Penske. I was on a few SCCA teams. Okay, makes sense. Anthony Cook says you bought a lemon chair. I'm glad you said that. And the reason I'm saying that is that I used to teach consumer protection at the University of Detroit Mercy School of Law. And I had to give a final exam. And I gave a final exam, and I always had one question about somebody goes to a garage sale and buys something. And the question is, what legal remedies do they have if it doesn't turn out to be what they're promised? And so, for instance, I had a question. I remember one year I said a woman walks into a garage sale and she sees a what appears to be a Tiffany lamp, and she asks the person, "Is that a Tiffany lamp?" And the woman goes, "Yeah, $5." So she buys it and takes it home. Not only is it not a Tiffany lamp, but it doesn't even work. What causes of action does she have, if any? Discuss. Oh, Bill Ream from Hershey, Pennsylvania. Did your brother ever get the turbine car done? They're still working on it. So they're getting closer. Robert Torre, BOAT, boat bust out another 1,000. Oh, Gilbert says you can rub the chair with lemon oil, which will clean it. And you know something? I might have some lemon pledge laying around. And of course, it'd be ironic if I lemoned the chair without a lawsuit. And Rachel Ratchet and Clank 25, Ratchet and Clank 25 said, isn't a garage sale item as is? Generally speaking, yes. However, depending on the statement made by the seller, if it's the kind of thing that you could rely upon, then you might be able to make an argument for a express warranty. Possibly. Hi, Steve. Do you know a good Second Amendment lawyer in an Indianapolis area? Keep up the great work. Telly Grimes. No, I do not. And I apologize. I don't know any attorneys in Indianapolis. I know some attorneys who handle stuff nationwide for the Lemon Law, but not any Second Amendment lawyers. I know a couple here in Michigan, but not in Indiana. Sorry about that. Michael Butts says, I think Tiffany is a style now, not a brand, but originally it was a brand. And so you could actually have a quote unquote Tiffany lamp that was a real signed Tiffany by Louis Comfort Tiffany or his studio. Or you could have a lamp in that style now. So there you go. Ryan Ridgely, thinking about buying a buyback truck. What are your thoughts? If it was bought back under the Lemon Law, I'd be real skeptical of it. And ask yourself, if these problems happen, will I be bummed out or not? So, you know, my good friend Sam Crack, I've talked about him here before, did do a Lemon Law buyback on a Lincoln. And he and I had a long discussion about that. And shortly after we had the discussion, it broke down again. Oh, Blendy Boys love your videos. They get me through the long drives I have every day. I'm not watching, but definitely listening to every word. Quite frankly, there's no need to watch. Okay, it's one of the reasons I didn't put up videos for the first year or two I did podcasts. I thought, who wants to watch somebody talk? It turns out that's a whole thing on YouTube. A lot of other crazy stuff on YouTube too, but so that's one of the reasons I got all the stuff behind me. And by the way, I got another complaint today by somebody saying, Steve, your set is too junky looking. Get rid of it. Get rid of it. So should I get in front of a green screen? What should I do? No, of course not. By the way, all that junk is cool. It's cool. It's all got every single piece of thing on my set has got a story to it. Viper Mike says, hi, Steve, you missed a great Viper event. When? Where? Nobody tells me these things. Gilbert says, I lived near Middle Belt in 17 or 18. Up there near West Bloomfield High School, kind of. No, not Middle Belt. I'm starting to think Orchard Lake. Middle Belt in 17 and 18. I know where that is too. It's a very cool area. I got friends who live out there right now. Where Washington County, Michigan is. I know there's a Washington Township. I don't know about Washington County. J6 says 10 years ago, I bought a sword at a garage sale and recently sold it for $400 as a collectible. Doesn't surprise me. I know that I've got a brother who's really into guitars. And he walked into a garage sale and he saw just a guitar in the corner. No case, and just leaning against the corner. And it was a Fender Mustang. And he looks at the guitar and he looks at the woman. He goes, is that for sale? And she goes, yeah, I want $5 for it. And he goes, I'll give you $3. She took $3 for it. He talked her down from $5. He later took it to a trade show and sold it. But he made some money on that one. Derek LaRue checks in. And I thank you very much for that. Again, I don't ever come on here and ask people to support me financially, but if you're so inclined, knock yourself out. And of course, when I highlight a question, I do read them all just in case. So there you go. Bob Blah Blah checks in. Greetings and salutations from the beautiful downtown Amelia, Ohio. Beautiful sounding town name. Of course, Bob's a good friend of mine. And I believe you're not far from kind of like the border there with Kentucky. Correct? Isn't that kind of down here where Amelia is? I always forget that when you're flying out of the Cincinnati airport, you're actually not anywhere near Cincinnati in that sense. I mean, you are, but you're not. You're actually in another state. Ron Schnapper says, or Schnaper, I love the D104 mic. What is its story? Well, some of the mics are just there because mics are cool. I don't think a mic needs that much of a story. But the D104 is the lollipop. It's got the round chrome face and then the long spindle. And it's got the key on the side, and it's just such an iconic mic. That and the Shure, the big Shure that's in the middle, the tall mic is also such an iconic microphone. But I've been collecting microphones for a long time. I worked in radio on and off, and so of course I have a thing for microphones. And I was really, really happy that they finally, I finally got myself an Electro Voice RE20, which is what I used in radio at almost every radio station I worked at. Mustafa El Gamal says Washtenaw County is west of Wayne County. Detroit is in Wayne County. Ann Arbor is in Washtenaw County. So for those of you who know that the University of Michigan, for instance, has a football team, they play their home games in Washtenaw County in a very, very big stadium nicknamed the Big House, where they do get something to the effect of 100,000+ people per game. It's one of the largest stadiums in the United States. Byron Arana says, "Do lawyers go to heaven? You will." Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And a lot of people do shoehorn lawyers into a cubbyhole and say they're all like this. And I assure you, in Michigan, is 40,000 lawyers, 40,000 now, I think, practicing attorneys. And there's people at all ends of the spectrum. I can find you people who are such jackasses they shouldn't be allowed out of the house. And I can also find you attorneys who are so nice that it would blow your mind that they, how do you even function as a lawyer? Don't you get pushed over all the time? And so, it's true of any profession. It's just unfortunate because some people do look at it and say, well, lawyers will go into court and make dumb arguments, so they must not have any ethics. And, there's a fine line between a dumb argument and an unethical argument. But it's one of the reasons I don't do criminal law. I think if I did criminal law, I'd be too hard pressed to make really dumb arguments on behalf of a client, especially if they seemed guilty. And G Vogue says, "Is the Canadian robot lady going to be here today?" I believe she said she will be. So she should be checking in one of these moments. Theodore Becker, are any of those ribbon mics? One of them is. I believe it's to the left. Of course, you can't see it from this angle. It's the one just on the other side of the Shure. And it's kind of a big rectangular-faced show. I'm not going sideways as fenders go to 12 as opposed to just going to 11. Frog Doggy says, "Appreciate the shows and your ability to teach." Hello from North Central Florida. North Central Florida. I appreciate that. Neuropilot says, "I showed some friends your video. They convert lemon buyback vans into camper RVs. Don't buy an RV when even the van has known correctable defects." Well, I mean, they're probably getting great deals on those vehicles. And by the way, if you buy a lemon law buyback, most of the car companies will say, "We fixed it," and will warrant that particular system for a period of time. The problem is they couldn't fix it before. What makes you think they can fix it now? And the promise to fix is not useful. It's the actual fixing that's useful. I've had people buy things that we knew were junk, and they go, "Yeah, but it's got a warranty." And guess what happens? If it can't be fixed after 10 repair attempts, bring it back an 11th time. We'll work on it. Bowtie Bagger, hello from Batavia, Ohio. Will you be doing the Dream Cruise this year? If so, what will you be driving? Yes, I'll be there. Depends on the weather. If there's any chance of rain, I will bring the Viper because it has a roof over it. And on the other hand, if it's not raining, I'll bring the Cobra. VSP 036, Steve, have you ever grievanced another attorney? Filed a grievance or a request for investigation against another attorney? I have on three separate occasions. 2 in Michigan, 1 in another state, believe it or not. And one of them, the attorney was disbarred, not entirely based on my complaint, but based on my complaint and other complaints. One of them was an attorney who got suspended for 3 years. And that was largely based on a complaint that I filed, and my client actually filed it, but it was something this guy did to my client. And then one of them is still pending. So we might talk about that somewhere down the road. Rex Foucher says some people hate lawyers until they need one. And that is absolutely true. That, that lawyer is so unethical. And then they hire one and go, "Hey, will you go into court and say I didn't do it?" Did you do it? Of course I did it. Oh, boy. Gilbert does hashtag don't buy an RV. Grubbenheimer says, Steve, what's your best lawyer joke? I did an entire video of lawyer jokes a couple of years ago. And some of them aren't that. I draw a distinction because if there's nothing specific about it being a lawyer, then to me it's not a lawyer joke. So if you go like, hey, what do you call 50 lawyers at the bottom of the ocean? I don't know what. A good start. Okay. What do you call 50 dentists at the bottom of the ocean? A good start. Like there's nothing lawyerish about being at the bottom of the ocean, right? So, I seem to recall Johnny Carson once coming out and saying it was so cold here. How cold was it that the lawyers had their hands in their own pockets? Now, that's a little better. That's a little better, but also, it's also Johnny Carson. Well, Bill 57 says the Lollipop mic or the 107 was very popular for CB radio users back in the day because of its great sound. I've heard that. I was just a little bit before the CB craze. I remember it, but I was young, really, really young. Xander Opal says, I think there's a difference between what is legal and what is moral. Well, of course there is. Yeah, morality and legality are two totally different things. So, for instance, is it legal to speed, to drive over the speed limit? Of course not. You can get a ticket for that. Is it immoral to drive over the speed limit? And so there are obviously some parallels and connotations where I can point to a crime that would be both immoral and illegal. Okay. But there's not a perfect overlap. So somehow the chat got away from me. I'm so sorry about that. Lucky Leprechaun says, hey, Steve, from deep in the heart of Texas, what's the deal with you and snake cards, Viper, Cobra? When are you going to get a Python? It's funny because I've actually had some people who said that to me and didn't get the joke or the connection because they're both Carroll Shelby related. Carroll Shelby, of course, designed or actually brought to market the Cobra, and then he helped design the Viper. And so there was a nod to Carroll with the Viper name because it's a snake. And so that's the connection. But that's how that works out. I'm not going sideways because a Viper in the rain is like drift racing a drag strip. Well, you just got to be real careful with that pedal. I've only had to drive it in the rain one time. I got caught coming back from the Troy traffic jam 2 years ago. And it was a beautiful day all day long. And then I got in my car to head home, and all of a sudden I saw black clouds on the horizon. I'm like, oh, that's the way I'm going. And I drove through a torrential downpour for about 10 minutes. And it's the only time I've driven that thing in the rain. It didn't hurt it, but it's just one of those things I was trying so hard not to get it in the rain. Artie D42 says, donating to the Get a Good Cheer Fund. Go Amish made. Mine lasted 10 years. Well, as noted previously, I do have a different chair on the set, which I used this morning for the video about Ticketmaster. And it's at the exact same height, exact same placement. But the difference, of course, is that it creaks when I sit on it. So I don't know. And Matt at War says, did I miss the chair talk? Well, that's actually what we were talking about. Chris Anthony, have you ever had to defend a judge? No. I've had people say bad things about judges that I'm familiar with. So I'd say, I'll defend him that way, but not in court. Jason Roberts says, I worked in a court system for 30 years. Once saw a guy found not guilty of burglary because he proved he was committing another burglary somewhere else. That's good. The question is, could they then try him for that burglary? And was he convicted of that? Because in that case, then you have true justice, right? So that's bizarre. Al Sanderson, are you into ham radio? I am not, but I know what it is. I've got a lot of friends who are and a lot of people in the audience who are. My brother, for many, many years, did the ham radio thing with the Morse code. And I knew people who did that. So, Telly Grimes says it's called a limit, not speed law. Oh. Masanur Rahman says, I run a law firm in Bangladesh. Any tips on using digital ads in Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, or Google ads? None of these social medias allow needs lawyers in their target marketing. I don't advertise, so I don't know. I apologize. I'm not completely sure how the advertising works on YouTube in the first place. But good luck with that. Find out what it is that, if you specialize in something, couldn't you target it regionally and say, I only want these to appear on the screens of people watching videos in Bangladesh? And so if you did, lemon law in Bangladesh, do you need a lemon law lawyer? Or no. Do you have a defective car? Do you need help with a defective car? But um, standard deviation, didn't Shelby also do a version of the Ford Mustang? Yes, yes. There's a whole line of Shelby cars with Ford and later on with Chrysler. So yeah, no, he did a bunch of stuff, but the two cars he's most associated with, well, I don't know about most, but everyone knows the actual Shelby Cobra. Everyone knows that car, and it's got his name in the title. A Shelby Mustang, also very, very cool. I mentioned a lot. I think last week we were talking about this. That I'm not generally a Ford Mustang guy. I mean, they're cool cars, but I've just never owned one. But if somebody said, Steve, you've got to own a Ford Mustang and you get to pick, it'd be a 69 convertible Shelby Ford Mustang. Out of $2, what is actually going to you? Oh, what portion of that goes to me? I think 60%. I think. It's been a while since I looked at that. Pac Northwest asked that question. And so you can Google that, by the way, because it's easier for me to find it through Google than it is for me to look up on YouTube. But I think it's 60%. So Joshua Mullen says, wow, until today, I thought the D104 Silver Eagle was exclusively made for the CB ham radio market. It might have been. I don't know. I did not know that. I simply knew it was a microphone, and I bought it simply because it's a cool looking microphone. And then I had a lot of people say, by the way, it is very, very popular with the CB radio folk back in the day. STP World says, my dad used to have a Dodge Shelby Lancer. I had a Shelby Daytona from the early 90s, I think it was. So, you could get the Shelby was licensing his name to all kinds of things. And the sad part was that quite often they would take a car that had like 112 horsepower and they would bump it to like 120. It's got 120 horsepower. Gotham Network says a 69 Shelby GT500 Fastback has the Ram Air 428 335 HP Cobra jet engine, giving it 335 horsepower. Also has a Borg Warner 4-speed tranny and a 3.5 traction lock limited slip rear end. Yes, and for 1969, that rocked. That right there rocks. And so make that a convertible, and I drive that car gladly, although it's worth so much money now that I don't know if I'd feel happy driving it. Bob A. Bong says, hi, Steve from sunny Niles, Michigan. Of course, Niles is down here. I'll mention this one time and one time only. Home of Tommy James and the Shondells. STP World said the Lancer had a really unusual stereo inside with an 8-band equalizer. Remember the equalizers? It's one thing if you got a stereo, you got a receiver. Okay, you got a receiver and you got a preamp. But do you have the graphic equalizer? Matt Daniel, I saw you on TV talking about cars. Where and when? What was it talking about? Jay Klein, you get a Shelby Dodge Omni in the late 80s and early 90s. I was convinced the first time I saw one of those, I go, well, Carroll Shelby must have died. There's no way he'd put his name on that. I think the thing had like 73 horsepower, and they boosted it to like 75. Or they might have put stickers on it. I don't know. So, and Basara 549 says my favorite Shelby was the Horizon GLH, incredible stealth car. And he was someone that beat Mustang GTs regularly in illegal street races between high school kids. Oh, Cold Lake Altus' 80th anniversary of D-Day on Thursday. I always know that D-Day is coming up, obviously, and I'm like, oh, wait a second, you're right. You're right. We'll have to. Yeah, glad you brought that up. I've been to Omaha Beach. I've walked Omaha Beach, and I was there, and also at the cemetery where they shot portions of Saving Private Ryan. And they didn't shoot any of the movie on the beach, but I walked the actual real beach. And I've been a few places in my life where I actually felt like emotionally moved. Okay, where I was like stunned at the effect that it had on me. Omaha Beach tops them all, and the cemetery at the top of the bluff at Omaha Beach likewise. It's too bad it's in France, but if you ever have the chance, if you ever go to France, make the trek up to Omaha Beach, walk the beach. And I went down. I was there at low tide. I went down at low tide, put my heels in the water and turned and looked to try to get a visualization of what it was like if you made it to the dry sand and you got a pack on your back, how far they had to get before they had any cover. And it was startling to me, and I wasn't carrying a pack. And I remember looking at it going, "Oh my God, the movies didn't do it justice because it's much further and would have been more dangerous than you could even imagine." And then you simply walk, and I was there on a very quiet day. There's like 3 people on the beach that day, and me and the person I was with were 2 of them. And walking around the beach, and it was just startling. And up just a little ways up on the beach, there are some cement embankments, emplacements where there's cement pillboxes that have gun slits in them or whatever, windows, and they're kind of getting slowly overgrown by the sand dunes and so on. But you could actually walk around inside of them. And at one point, I walked into one, and it was set up in such a way that the window faced across down the beach, but not out to sea. So they could shoot at people on the beach, but the boats didn't have a clear shot at them. And I remember standing in that little room, trying to imagine what that would have been like. And then I turned and looked, and there was a hole in the wall about this big, right behind where I was standing, where clearly somebody had gotten a pretty big gun and punched a hole in that wall. And you can't describe it. And it's one of those places where literally, I mean, I took pictures. I walked around and soaked it up more than I go to a lot of places. I've been to, the Royal Museum or whatever. And you walk through it. I mean, I would remember just stopping and looking. And then take 3 more steps and then stopping again and just looking. And so Omaha Beach, D-Day, it's one of those events that we need to make sure is never forgotten, obviously. So Be Beautiful says, here I'm in Nebraska listening to you talk about squeaky chairs while I'm cleaning my house. Hey, I like to be on topic. Oh, boy. Reinhard Man says, American World War II cemeteries in Belgium were impressive. I remember, I forgot it was Schwarzkopf, but one of the American generals, maybe Colin Powell, commented one time where he said, the U.S. Army goes around the world, the U.S. military goes around the world, and we do all kinds of stuff, but we never claim any land. We never take land. We conquered this. This is ours now. He goes, except for the small spaces that we need to bury our dead. That's it. And it was such a profound thing to realize that, there's this American cemetery in, hang on a second. There's an American cemetery in France, and I believe it's maintained by the Americans. And so if you go there, there are actually, like, for instance, there's people standing around, like docents, standing around who, if you will ask them for help, say, I'm looking for a grave. They'll go, oh, what are you looking for? Let me help you find it. And they're just standing there quietly and respectfully. And if you look carefully in the opening and closing scenes of Saving Private Ryan, you'll see these guys standing around, and they're just standing there. They're just there to help. They're just there to help you. And they realize that a lot of people are going to show up, and they're going to say, yeah, I've got someone here, but I don't know where they are. I don't know how to find them. And they'll say, oh, we'll help you. We'll help you. And so it is like I said, it's one of those things. I've been to Europe a bunch of times, seen a bunch of cool stuff in Europe. And I tell people that the Omaha Beach was right up at the top of the list of things that I'm glad I saw. So, Bob Simmons, are you ex-military? No, I am not. I have a lot of respect for the military. People send me stuff and they say, hey, can you put this on the set? And I do put stuff on the set, but I'm not implying that I'm in the military. So I've even got something on the set from the Coast Guard. Someone sent that in. I said, I salute you for your service, because that person was in the Coast Guard. So, hi, Steve. Could a judge use the fact that one was found civilly liable in a civil case for sentencing a person found guilty of 34 felony convictions in a criminal case? Interesting question, which I will read because you highlighted it. Thank you very much. I don't know if civil convictions are used routinely to enhance or mitigate penalties in criminal cases. Because I know that quite often, and I'm speaking generally here, if you get convicted of a crime, they do a pre-sentencing investigation, a pre-sentencing report, and they try to determine what kind of sentence would be appropriate for you. And they'll often do things like look at your criminal record and say, well, this person's done this 10 times before. maybe they need to learn a lesson. Or they got a clean record, ain't nothing on their record. So maybe this is the first time, wrong place, wrong time. So I'll be honest, though, I don't know what the situation is in any particular state because I'm only in the state of Michigan. And I've done criminal law in the past, but not recently. And I don't remember them ever looking at civil actions as part of the pre-sentencing reports. I hope that answers your question. Craig Grant says, have you seen Florida pass a law cracking down on HOA's power? I know I've seen it. Don't remember if I've done a video on it or not. A bunch of states have passed laws about it recently. So I will get to it if I haven't. Fred Blowers from Grandville, Michigan. And yes, I remember that your father used to own a Pontiac Grand. There are 2 or 3 people who check in every single time, including the guy or the gal who uses the screen name Burning Sensations, where I have the one thing I've got to say. And my father, back in 1975, I believe it was, when General Motors, for a brief period of time, got rid of all convertibles, and they announced, I think it was a 75 Granville, was going to be one of the last convertibles built by General Motors. My dad loved convertibles. He loved convertibles. And he made a point to order one that year, and he drove it for as long as he could. And then finally he had to get rid of it. And he actually sold it to one of his employees. And she drove it for quite some time. So he got to see it. But I remember my dad on the weekends. My dad worked really, really hard Monday through Friday. He had to commute quite a ways. So he was up early, got home late. In the summertime, he would roll out that car. And that's the car he drove to and from work. And he'd roll the car up, put the top on. Hey, guys want to go for a ride? We'd all pile in the convertible and go for a ride, And it's kind of funny because I mentioned it 2 weekends ago. I brought my Cobra by my parents' house where my father still lives. And I had it there and we were walking and looking at it. I go, Dad, you want to go for a ride? He goes, sure. Now, I have a hard time getting into cars at my age. But he got in, he got out, and he enjoyed the ride. So we were driving through downtown Birmingham. And I'm driving along. My dad's in the passenger seat, and we're in my convertible. So that was a lot of fun. Oh. Jerry C is certainly a reason that was called the Greatest Generation. A much older friend of mine who passed years ago lost his leg from a German mine and is proud to have served. I love that old man. It's fascinating because I've encountered veterans also, and how many of them quietly will talk to you about it if you ask politely and nicely. But even then, they're not like bragging about it. One thing that gets me so sick is when I hear about people who are busted for the faking the valor thing, where they stolen valor, where they claim, oh, I was a Navy SEAL, I was injured 19 times. Turns out the guy was never in any military branch ever. And so when somebody who really was a hero tells you, oh, by the way, yeah, I did this, I did that, I did. And so I actually went to a very good friend of mine's father passed away, and I'd never met his dad before. And so it's kind of like, oh, I'm sorry, but I went to the funeral because, my good friend's father passed away. And I walked up to the front, and they had a display of his World War II stuff. And he was a tank commander in Patton's army. He was underneath, roundabout way, Patton in Europe in late 44, early 45. Tank commander in a Sherman. I'm like, I didn't know that. And he goes, well, he didn't talk about it a whole lot. Okay. And don't he didn't have to talk about it. I was just mind blown. Like, what an amazing thing to have done, so. Jay Klein says, I was at an old farmhouse in Denmark that had a secret room that was used to hide Danish Jews during World War II. Current owner used it as a wine cellar. G. Vogt says the American cemeteries overseas are maintained meticulously by the citizens of that country. But I was under the impression, and I could be completely wrong in this, but I was under the impression that the Normandy Beach Cemetery was at least overseen or managed by the U.S. National Park Service, but I could be wrong. I'm not talking about who cuts the checks. I'm talking about who actually runs it. Stuff Writer says, could you quickly explain the process serving procedure? You mentioned in another video you once served someone by tossing it at their feet. Okay, stuff writer. I got to tell you one thing. First of all, this will vary wildly by state, and I'm in Michigan. But I can tell you right now that generally speaking, all a process server's got to do is get the thing into your presence in a way that you could take them if you wanted to and make you aware what they are. So if I go to hand it to you and go, you've been served, and you back away slowly, I can drop it at your feet and you're served. And I don't care what anybody says. I've seen people in court try to make those arguments. I've seen, well, Your Honor, my client backed away from it, but he knew what it was, right? And so I've served a bunch of people. For a little while, it was a hobby of mine. And I had a guy once who ran an oil change shop. I used to sue oil change shops all the time. And so this oil change shop did a screwed up oil change in my client's car, and the engine blew up. So I went to sue them for it, and I found out who this agent for process was, and it was the guy who owned the shop. So I walked in one day, and I say the guy's name, and he goes, "Yeah, it's me." And I go, "Oh, here you go. You're being sued." And I walked out. The guy comes running after me and tries giving the papers back to me. And I go, "Dude, that's not how it works." And he dropped them at my feet. And I looked at him, I go, "You're going to pick those up?" And he's, "No, I'm not." I said, "Fine, see ya." And I got in my car and I drove home. And about an hour later, I got a phone call from an attorney, very, very embarrassed. And he goes, can you fax me that complaint that you served on my client today? I go, "Why? Didn't he pick it up before it blew away?" And he goes, "Well, all he could find was the front page." I go, "You guys aren't going to question service, are you?" He goes, "Of course not. Of course not." I've heard of stories also before where somebody showed up at a house, knocked on the door, a person spoke to them through the door, and they recognized the voice as being the person. They said, "I've got papers for you." And they go, "Screw you, I'm not going to open the door." They lay him at the foot of the door and go, "You've been served." Now, don't get me wrong. A judge might say to that one, "How do you know it was them? Do you know their voice?" But courts don't like to hear that people are dodging service, because a court can also order alternate service. I've had a judge tell me, you can take it to their house and nail it to their front door, or actually they refer to it as, tacking it to the front door. It can be taped, it can be nailed, whatever. I've seen banks nail it though. And then say, like, you have to post a copy down the bulletin board in the lobby of the courthouse. And guess what? At that point, it doesn't matter whether you saw it or not. You've been, served through alternate service. So, but generally speaking, it is put it in their presence and notify them of what it is. And whether they choose to take it or not is irrelevant. You don't need to consent to being served. So, Ilpo Weckland says, "Hi, Lehto. I'm Finnish too. I live in Sweden." Yeah, there's a lot of confusion there between the Swedes and the Finns, because there's a while there where Finland was simply part of Sweden. It's also part of Russia at one point. And there's a lot of people with Swedish names living in Finland and vice versa. And there's also a lot of people who speak both languages. And the languages are quite different. So Dave Stoner says, "If you go back to the military cemetery in Belgium, find someone in management, ask them a story about General Patton's wife's ashes." Okay, I've not heard that story, so I'll have to check that out. Oh, boy. Misty Cassidy says, "I got a 1986 convertible Corvette, first one since 75, which kind of lines up with the story I told, I believe." Bernadine Sackinger says, "You should read the citations of the men who earned the Medal of Honor and the Victoria Cross." Is that a book, or are you just talking about in general? Because whenever I come across a story about a war hero who earned one of those highest decorations for bravery, I'm blown away. In fact, a good friend of mine named Dwayne Beeman posted on Facebook yesterday that there is a road in Flint, Michigan called Hammerberg Road. And I've seen it before. I've worked in Flint a whole bunch, and I never knew what it meant. I just thought, well, some guy named Hammerberg. Turns out he's a Medal of Honor winner, a Medal of Honor awardee, who died. He's a diver, and he was trying to save people. And there had been a ship that sank, and he was diving on the wreck, pulling out people who were still alive. And then he got pinned underneath it and died. And so this road is named after him. I didn't know the story. So, yeah, they're fascinating. It's always, it's not, hey, some guy went off and sat in a foxhole for 5 days and then came home and we gave him his medal. No. It's usually stuff like This guy, despite being shot 3 times, crawled 100 yards back into enemy territory to bring back 4 wounded people one at a time over the period of 6 hours. You know, I mean, stuff where you're like, the fact that anybody did that, yes, give that guy a medal. Dustin Board says, I enjoy your content, but I use an ad blocker. So here's $5. Thanks. No, thank you. I appreciate that. Jay Dixon says American Battles Monuments Commission manages 26 overseas military cemeteries, 29 memorials, monuments, and markers, nearly all of honor those who served in World War I or II. So it's overseen by and managed, I'm guessing, but it might be paid for by the locals. But again, who knows? I just know that, again, like I said, notwithstanding anything else, if you ever get to Europe and you're from the US, please do what you can to get to Omaha Beach and do what I did. Go down and walk around in the sand for a while and just think about it. So David Peterson says Finland produces some of the best NHL goalies. Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that. It was, I believe, an Atlantic Monthly, but there was a magazine that did a full-length feature article about not just the good goalies from Finland, but they almost all came through the same system with the same goalie coach, okay? And I read this big piece, and they're interviewing all of these top goalies in America who are Finnish. And then they went to Finland and interviewed the guy who was their coach. And it's just something about that system with that guy. And I remember one of the Finnish goalies was being interviewed, and Finnish people in general, let alone goalies, aren't known for being loquacious, as we'd say. They don't talk a lot. And the reporter, I think it was, asked the goalie and said, why do you think it is that you take your job so seriously? And he goes, my mistakes end up on the scoreboard. Now, there are other sports where other people's mistakes wind up on the scoreboards, but it's not as obvious. In baseball, you hit a home run, yet you put a score on the scoreboard, but no one goes, hey, that pitch, as much as in a game that's 1-0 in hockey or 2-1. And you look at it and go, if that goalie hadn't screwed up, so. Lucky Leprechaun says, Steve, I drive a convertible. They're best for morning and night drives. Unfortunately, streetlights are now LED, which are blinding. I miss the orange streetlights, LED lights, the sky, not the ground. Yeah, it's to me, and I admit I've only got 600 miles in the Cobra, 600 miles. But largely, it's just temperature. If it's too cool outside, I hate cranking the heat and driving around. So, William Page, thank you for your correction. Medals of Honor are not won; they're awarded. It is not a competition. Yeah, and that's the thing is again, I didn't say it on purpose the first way. That's kind of how it comes out. But I am aware of these things, and so I try to be as respectful as I can. Hobie Jackson, I'm a Vietnam veteran. I've only one person asked me about the war who actually wanted to listen. Most people change the subject. I wish you lived nearby. I'd love to chat with you about that. G. Vogt, who's on here also, I believe, did time in Vietnam and wrote a book about it, by the way. Just saying, says Steve, in the 80s, I was in the military and traveled to Switzerland. When I looked down from the hotel, I saw the identical color and model 1975 Grand Prix of my next door neighbor. That's freaky. Early retirement, says Steve, I've been watching your channel for a long time. I was wondering advice for a young person who wants to become an attorney. Well, here's the thing. Number one, you don't have to be young. I knew people who changed careers in their 40s or 50s. And I believe there's a woman in my law school class who was in her 60s. Okay. So you can do it later. And by the way, if you went and had a career for 10, 20 years and then went to law school, you actually become very valuable because of your real life knowledge. I've met attorneys who were 5 years old, just undergrad law school, boom. And they get hired at some big law firm. So I'm making big money. I'm working at this big law firm, and you ask them something and you can tell that they don't know that much about the real world. They got also education, but they don't have that real life learning experience. So Cold Lake Alta as an ex-goalie, that red light is the most embarrassing thing on earth, let alone the buzzer. I'm telling you right now, I have to imagine that. Think about Pavlov's dogs, right? The idea that you associate a sound or an image with something so negative that as a goalie, when you hear that horn sound or you see that red light, I'm surprised you guys can drive in traffic because every red light's got to bum you out. Oh. 99 says my dad rarely talked about Vietnam. And that's true of Vietnam. It's also true of a lot of the wars. I know a lot of people who didn't like to talk about a lot of that stuff. And we've also heard the terms like shell shock and so on. That was what they would say about guys who came back from the First World War who'd changed. And it's unfortunate because there was a time that we threw parades and stuff for our armed forces. And then, of course, in the 60s and 70s, unfortunately, guys who got drafted and went to Vietnam and came back were not welcomed back the same way. And that's just it's just unfortunate. And I think that's swung around a little bit again now, back towards where it's not like it used to be. But there was just unfortunate moment in time, I think, where that was the case. So Robert Torres is just hanging around for 50 years, gets you something. But getting back to I completely went off topic. Sorry. Advice to somebody who wants to become an attorney for law. I know other people who had history degrees. I know people who had sociology degrees. I knew somebody who's an archaeologist. I knew somebody who's a petrochemical engineer. And so get a good degree in something else, get good grades, and then get into the best law school you can. Take it very, very seriously. But do be a little careful about the student loans. Student loans can haunt you for quite some time. John Laurie, and that's all I've got to say about that. Randy Pabo says, I have a question. I've been waiting all week to ask you. Have you ever been in a courtroom when someone's representation entered a plea of autrefois convict acquit? I've never even heard of that. So I get asked from time to time where people will say, Steve, how come you never mention this? How come you never mention? And they'll mention something that is old. I'm talking not just old school. I'm talking about like pre-common law. It's something that's both French, Latin, and like Scottish or something like what? And you have to understand that a lot of the stuff that was around back then still exists, but a lot of times they've modernized it. And so they've actually gone in and made it more modern. And I had somebody ask me the other day about a certain type of subpoena. I said, well, in Michigan, the Supreme Court creates standardized forms, and those standardized forms are approved by the Supreme Court. They're the ones you use. And we have a thing, it's called a subpoena. It's not called whatever the thing was that I got asked about. The guy goes, why don't you ever talk about them? I go, because they all got merged into a subpoena. Like, sorry. And if you tried creating something else and said, I'm going to file this wacky thing with the court, they go, what is this? Just use a subpoena form. Melanie Howe, why have smartwatches not been banned from courtrooms as they can do all a smartphone can do? The technology probably just simply hasn't caught up with the people out in the hallway with respect to what they know. I don't know. So I know a lot of that. They try to stop it, but they also it's partly on the honor system. They're hoping that they'll have signs saying you can't do this, and you get caught, you might get in trouble. But it's going to vary wildly from state to state and the court. Michael Lawless, a Dukas Takem. Dukas Takem is a type of subpoena. That wasn't the term I got asked about. But it's not uncommon that you'll serve a subpoena on somebody Dukas Takem. It literally just means to the effect of you show up and testify, but bring stuff with you. And we're going to ask you to bring these certain things with you. Menko says, I never clicked on a live, but I just had to see the set from the outside. Yes, we were on the the left of the set. Hardware Hank says, love the Minnesota plate. That was sent in by a viewer. My screen is not a mirror and it throws me off. Christopher Dillon, why is recording courtroom sometimes forbidden? This is an interesting question because most courtrooms that I know of in Michigan are being recorded. They have cameras all around them. They've got microphones all around them. Everything's being recorded. But years ago, they were worried about people bringing in cameras and photographing jurors, for instance. And if jurors are trying to concentrate on a case and they look over and some guy's taking their picture with a camera, that would distract a juror. And then, of course, letting everyone know that, hey, this person's on that jury, that person might not want that information out there. So one reason they do it is to protect the jury. That's one reason. But the other is that if you want to get a copy of what happened in the courtroom, you can, hey, Lois Miller's asking a question about G Vogt, V-O-G-T. Hey, G, can you step in and answer the question about the name of your book? I remember it close, but I'm not sure I'd be perfectly correct on that. But it's the letters that he wrote home during Vietnam. And it's being recorded, and you can get copies of that. And so I think the courts are concerned that someone's going to go into court, record something surreptitiously, take it out, chop it up, and then say, look what happened in court. And is the court going to then have to go, okay, fine, we're to, and so I think they're more concerned about, look, there's already a good recording being made. So use that. But otherwise, people in the gallery with recording devices would be distracting. Dum Dum says, I remember watching you years ago with RVs. Do you still travel? What was your favorite area? I never traveled in an RV, but I talked about it. My favorite place to visit is in northern Michigan, in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. The Keweenaw Peninsula, very, very tip, is a place called Copper Harbor. As far as destinations go, I like Copper Harbor a lot. So, Tim Nossum, thank you very much, friend. Appreciate that. Opinion Rat, how are all of those custom license plates made? Well, I've never made one. However, many of them are novelty plates, which you can buy off the internet. So you can go to, I think it's like Amazon, and type in Minnesota novelty license plate, and somebody will make you something similar or akin to that. So hard to do that backwards. Lowell Riggsy, would you like a few boxed Atari 2600 games to add to your decor? Anything you feel like sending in, if it'll fit, I'll jam it in there somewhere. I was never a big Atari fan, but I did play Williams Defender quite a bit. Oh, boy. Heather Ryan, is that the same with everywhere about the recording of courtrooms? It is common across America. I'm not sure if it's uniform or universal. The Most Sly Fox. We're doing a trip late July up to Marquette and Copper Harbor. Thank you very much. Please do. You will enjoy it. Go to Copper Harbor, eat at the Mariner North, have breakfast at the Pines, stop by for a drink at Lake Effect. Be sure to stop by the Minnetonka and buy gifts. These people who own these businesses are all friends of mine. They do a great job. And when you get there, you're going to realize that it was worth the trip. It is out in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Brad M73, are license plates still made by prisoners in jail? I've always been curious about that. I remember that was like one of the biggest jokes. As the biggest joke, like, we're going to send you, have you make license plates. I was like, really? They need that many prisoners to make license plates? But then again, I guess, can you show us a yo-yo trick? Hang on a second. Oh, boy. I'm just trying to figure out how Bob saw that. I just happen to have my Omega Fireball right here. And I know it used to be up over here someplace. And man, do you remember the yo-yo phases? Every couple of years, Every couple of years would be a yo-yo phase, right? Let me see if I can get this thing to sleep. Whoa, hang on. Hang on. I'm trying not to hit the floor with it. Wait a second. The string is tangled. Uh-oh. We might be out of luck on this, people. Oh. Who played with this yo-yo? I can't fix it right now. I'm sorry. Oh, I got a great rock the cradle. Oh my gosh. You just have to trust me on that one. I have a new string though, so I can fix it. MOS 8541. Hello from Arizona. I was born at MSU. My parents were grad students there back in the day. My father got his PhD at MSU. And for a brief period of time, I lived in Lansing as well. And I've driven by the house I grew up in. And I'm like, whoa, that thing is tiny. Oh, Robert Torres says, walk the dog. I'm not as good at that as I am rocking the cradle, because rock the cradle you can do up here. Walking the dog, I'm always worried about bouncing it off the ground and stuff. So, Reinhard Man says a yo-yo master who also practices law. Yeah, I'm pretty good with a frisbee too. I had many inexpensive hobbies as a child. So, oh yeah, DePaul, the Duncan yo-yo craze, the Duncan Imperial. That was like the big deal. Now the Yo-Mega, when the string's not tangled. Wonder, does this come undone? Hang on. Hang on. Wait a second. Uh-oh. I figured out the problem is. This thing comes apart. Hang on. Do you play frisbee golf, Chris Anthony? No, I've never played frolf. I never thought frisbee shouldn't be competitive. Frisbee is an art form. Same reason that, like, oil painting shouldn't be. I'm winding this thing like I'm an amateur, when in reality everyone knows you do that right there. Hang on. Blaine Horning. Hey Steve, love from Parkland, Washington. There we go. Oh, hang on. I'm trying to figure out how tight the. Hang on. It's a little too sleepish. Hang on. Right now, somebody's going, wait, that guy's an attorney. Okay. Bingo. There you go. So. Oh boy. So there you go. Thank you, Bob, for pointing it out to me. I might do a video of nothing but just yo-yo. I don't have a lot of tricks. That's a problem. I've also got a thing I can do with a sleight of hand. I once did a magic trick, but that's a long story. Lil Riggs says, Blaine Horning, I'm over in Yakima, just in case you guys want to get together. Mark Miller, multi-talented Steve. Mark Sparks, up next, lawn dart throwing demonstration. Never had lawn darts. I know people who did. Earthbound Misfit, have you ever thrown an aerobee? Is that kind of like a football thing that spins through the air? I've seen them, but never used one. Reinerman, have you ever had any yo-yo clients? Early in my career, I'll tell you right now, here's, for those of you who have friends or relatives who are going through law school right now, I'm going to give you the most valuable piece of advice that you've ever heard as a lawyer. Is early in your career, when you're hungry, you'll be tempted to take everything and anything that walks in the door. Someone walks in, they got money, they got to hire you to do something. You go, boom, I want you to hire me. Give me your money. One bad client will waste the time that it takes to help out 10 good ones. And spotting those clients early on is a skill set that's worth more than anything else. And I've had people who wanted me to help them. And after a little while talking to them, I realized I don't want to help this person. I know it's gonna go badly. Bob Summers, show us karate. have I ever put pictures of that up on my channel? I also have a second degree black belt in Taekwondo, which I've mentioned once or twice. I don't talk about it a lot because I haven't worked out in a while. So I have some photographs of myself doing side kicks quite high, which is an impressive thing to do. But the pictures were taken a long time ago, and I can't get my leg that high anymore. G Keyman 565, a neighbor from across the road was killed by a lawn dart when I was a kid. There actually were fatalities from lawn darts, and lawn darts will. It was one of those things where you look at it and go, okay, I understand if they're used correctly, they're perfectly safe. Used incorrectly, it goes sideways real fast. And when I was in law school, we read a case out of California where a guy developed a thing to help guys learn how to play golf. You want to work on your swing. I forgot what the product was called, but it's basically a big spike you'd stick in the ground, and then you'd put a ball on top of it. But the ball had a cord on it that went back to the spike. And so you'd put the ball on the ground and you'd hit it as hard as you could, and the ball would just come. The ball would just come back to you, about as hard as you hit it out. And people were just getting clobbered by these things. Oh, Heather Ryan asks, "What do you mean a bad client? What makes a bad client?" Well, I can tell you. Primarily, it's somebody who doesn't want to take your advice. So if someone comes into my office and goes, "Here, Steve, here's my case. Here's what I want to do. Can we do this?" If I say, "Well, based on what I know and 33 years of doing this, your best option would be to do this." If they go, "No, I don't want to do that. I want to do this." Okay, you're not hiring me for my expertise then. You're hiring me just to be a lawyer. You can go hire anybody to do that. And I don't know why people don't get that. If you went into your doctor and you said, "Hey, doc, I've got this thing on my arm. What do you think it is?" And the doctor goes, "Well, I think it's this, and here's how you treat it." No, let's not do that. Let's do something else. Most doctors will say, "I'm really sorry, but you have to leave now." And so people think because it's the law, it's more opinions and talking and stuff. But I've had people who wanted me to do stuff that was inadvisable at the very least, and possibly even wrong at the most. And I say, "No, I won't do that." And so I've actually had somebody arguing, saying, "No, but I want you to be my attorney." I'm like, "I'm sorry, I can't help you. I'm sorry, I can't." Cyberdoc, like number 450, lawn darts were made to toss over your roof into the neighbor's yard. I think that's one of the warnings in the box. Do not toss over the roof. Robert Torrey got a Steve Lehto action figure to hawk on the channel. No, but I did get someone today who sent me an email and said, "Steve, you were wearing a Lehto's Law shirt on camera one day." And I like that. It's got the logo, Lehto's Law, the little microphone. "Where can I get one of those?" And I said, "Oh, you can get one from Zazzle. Go to Zazzle and type in Steve Lehto, and you'll find the shirts and the coffee mugs." But I stopped talking about them because nobody is buying them except me. Oh, boy. G. Vogt says the title of my book, available on Amazon, is Dear Gang, Letters Home from a Combat Photographer with the 1st Cavalry. And I read the book. It's wonderful. And here's the thing. We always think of war as being what you see in the movies, and there's a bunch of guys in trenches, and every now and then they get a glimpse of the enemy and possibly army tanks or airplanes or whatever. And there's all kinds of people in the military doing all kinds of stuff. And Mr. Vogt was in the cavalry, 1st Cavalry, but he was a combat photographer. So the army wants photographs taken of stuff. They send a photographer. They send him. They go, "Here, go take a picture of this." And I believe there's a battle that took place someplace. They want photographs. They send him, and it could be an exciting job. I mean, so it's such an interesting slice of what happens that I love reading these stories from unexpected corners. I've never even thought about a guy who is a war photographer, army photographer, and what he goes through. And so these are all the letters that he wrote home at that time. Somebody had the foresight to save them. Burning sensations. My dad taught me, don't always listen to your customers. Yeah, once in a while, the customers can be wrong. So Gilbert says bobblehead. Yeah, I do have the hang on, if I can do this right. No. Right there, that's the Arthur Penhollow bobblehead, WRIF in Detroit, baby. But I can't do that. But I do not have a bobblehead yet. Connor Thomas says, I'd highly recommend visiting Mammoth Cave National Park if you haven't been there. I've not been there. I'll have to check it out. Blah, blah, blah. Does Peloton still support the machine you have? Yes, as far as I can tell. I used it this morning. Have they stopped supporting some machines? So, Daniel Cleveland from Louisiana. Follow you so much and love this channel. It's the great information. It's great. The information, much love. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Lucky Leprechaun, if you weren't an attorney, what would your profession be? Well, I write a lot of books. I could be a writer, and I've been a writer. I also like doing stuff like this. So I can see myself in broadcasting on some level, although you can see why you can't do that nowadays. It's tough. It's really, really tough to make it in media today. So L. Grant Nelson, my father had a large photo album of war pictures. Very cool. Big Red, WRIF, baby. Yeah, I'm reading a book right now. Somebody sent me a book. I've not seen him in the chat today, but somebody sent me a book in the history of Cleveland radio. And being from Michigan and Detroit, I don't know that much about Cleveland, but I know the radio is much like Detroit's, the radio market. And it's like WMMS, WNCR. And so the book talks all about the history of these radio stations in the early days. And it's very similar to what happened in a lot of other major markets. But like in Detroit, I believe the first freeform radio station was WABX 99 FM, 99.5. And then, of course, there was WRIF and W4, WW. And then LLZ came in later, and W4 changed the country, and then the other stations have all kind of changed the formats. RIF is the last one standing, and they still play more or less rock and roll. I think they've aged some of it a little bit with the demographics, but WABX in the first days they were on the air did things like, a kite fly in at Belle Isle, or they would promote the Hash Bash in Ann Arbor. Things that most corporate radio stations couldn't do. Reinhard Mann's darkness in the cave is a whole new level of dark. I've been inside a copper mine in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, a hard rock mine, hundreds of feet below ground, where it is dark as dark can be. So I understand that. Damian T, what would be your catchphrases if you had a bobblehead? People say Steve. That's the first one. Jake Lyons, I heard Spotify discontinued their car thing, automotive music playback dongle, leaving 100,000 consumers with $90 bricks in their cars. I heard about that too, but I don't know enough about it to speak, and I did not read the articles. But if you bought a device that's tied to a format like that is useless with other people, you got to wonder about that. And I think I hear a class action coming. They don't make any noise, but I can still hear one coming. I never liked Spotify. Back in the early days, I'm talking about a while ago, when you logged into Spotify, it would try to guess what music you liked. And if you told it you liked Peter Gabriel, it would say, oh, you must like Phil Collins. And you could sit there and thumbs down every Phil Collins song on the earth, and it would still go, well, you must still like Phil Collins. You like Peter Gabriel. No, I don't. I don't know why you'd think that. In my mind, they're two totally different ends of a very, very broad spectrum. No. And Spotify's like, here's another Phil Collins song for you because you're a Peter Gabriel fan. It's like, oh my God. I stopped listening to it. Stuff Writer says, hey, WLEW, the Steve Lehto Morning Show, Bad Axe, Michigan. I did morning briefly in Flint, Michigan. And I mean briefly. From January to like March or April of 1989. And that was tough, getting up at like 4 o'clock in the morning and trying to be funny. And just as you're waking up, the show is over. F cars, any news in the turbine car? They're still working on it. Lowell Rigsium says, I like Phil Collins. There's nothing wrong with liking Phil Collins. Okay. And you can like anybody you want. I could right now name for you 5 songs I like that make you go like, what? Are you mentally ill? Right. I'm just telling you that for a machine or an algorithm to say, well, you like this, you must like that. Even after I keep telling them, I don't, but you must. No, I don't, but you do. No, I don't. Okay, so the question is, if you like Phil Collins, do you like Peter Gabriel? CyberDoc, do you still use SiriusXM? Yes, I do. It's installed in one of my trucks. I've got a Ford Explorer that's got it, and I do pay the subscription. And I like a couple of their channels a lot. I like First Wave. I like their 60s and 70s channels. Occasionally, I'll be flipping around and I hear a song I have never heard before. Never, which is mind blowing to me, having worked in radio as often as I did. Stephanie House is they're both in Genesis. Yeah, I think that might be the connection. And I think that's why Spotify assumes you must like them both. But no, you don't have to like them both. You don't have to. Angel Castillo says, I unsubscribed to Pandora when it was playing thumbs down songs. I had to pull over my bike. Yeah, I don't understand that. You'd think that it would go, okay, someone's paying us for money. You're paying us money to do this. Let's do what they want us to do. Oh boy. Did somebody ask about the songs? Hang on. It went past me. Mantis Toboggans is Red Rain, Peter Gabriel. That is a great song. I've seen Peter Gabriel in concert twice. Bob Bonks is Prisoners up at Marquette Make American Flags. Doesn't surprise me. I know they had a prison workshop there for years, and they had a roadside store. It's called the Prison Workshop Store. And you could buy like leather goods made by prisoners in the Marquette prison. So, Don McR, tell us the 5 songs. One of the songs that I absolutely love is I've Never Been to Me by Charlene. I love that song. I don't care what you say. Hey, lady, you lady, cursing at your life. You're a discontented mother and a regimented wife. I could go on, but I won't. That song is fabulous. And people right now are going, oh my God, that song's horrible. But there's no such thing as, an objectively, measurably good song. It's all subjective. If it appeals to you, it appeals to you. There are songs that I like. And you go, Steve, what's a song about? I don't know. Why do you like it so much? One line in that song hits me, and I don't know why. And so I'm going to tell you right now that one of my favorite albums of all time is an album called Imperial Bedroom by Elvis Costello. Now, I used to be a huge Elvis Costello fan. I kind of stopped following him the last couple of years, but his first 5 or 6 albums were stellar. Armed Forces, This Year's Model, Get Happy, Imperial Bedroom is wonderful. It's wonderful. And there's a song in there called Man Out of Time. Man Out of Time. And it's got a bunch of stuff in there about a political scandal. And I've even read his autobiography where he talks about writing the song and what inspired him. That song is one of my favorite songs of all time. I actually have an autographed album. The LP is autographed by Elvis Costello. And I've got it framed on my wall. Okay? And I've had people say, Steve, you got this autographed and framed on your wall. It must be important to you. I go, it is. It's my favorite album of all time. What's your favorite song? Man Out of Time. Why? I don't know. They go, what do you mean you don't know? What's it about? I go, it doesn't matter what it's about. It's got one line. And he says, to murder my love is a crime. And I don't know why, but the first time I heard that, it was like, it struck me. And I know people, I've had this exact same discussion with other people about other songs, and they go, I have the exact same thing. And they tell me a song, I'm like, really? But I have to pretend that I believe them because I know how it is for me. Supplanter, Almost Blue, almost doing things we used to do. What about Just a Memory? Losing You is just a memory. Lower Rigsian says, I heard a lot of songs like Never Been to Me on VH1's One Hit Wonders. Yeah, and that's an interesting angle also because there are a lot of bands that put out, or singers that put out one song that they hit it out of the park and never did it again on. And you look at it and go like, what? How is that possible? How is that possible that you did that? And so, I mean, I can think of others. I can think of a lot of others where you go like they had this one fabulous song. Now, it also is true that a band can have one big song in one country, but not big songs in other countries. And I mentioned the Waterboys, okay? They only had one hit in America, and it wasn't even a hit. It was just a minor little thing called The Whole of the Moon, WHOLE, The Whole of the Moon. I read Mike Scott's autobiography. The story is fascinating. The guy's a brilliant writer, but he's got that one song. And I hear that one song, and I literally, it's one of those songs I'll put on repeat for like play after play after play. I love that song. It's been covered by other people. Terry Reid covered it. The Killers covered it. But it's a great song. But their version also is mind blowing. And you look at the guy, and he's a prolific musician. He's cranked out a ton of music. I listen to his other stuff, and I'm like, none of it does it. Just that one song gets me. I don't know why. It just does. Geary Rexworks says, Steve, good afternoon. I hope the books and shirts are in your hands. They are, sir. And thank you for checking in. I just mentioned a minute ago that I'd recently received from a viewer a book on the history of Cleveland radio. Actually, it's two books. One big, thick book on the history of Cleveland radio, and then a follow-up book that the author wrote later about some just little shorter anecdotes. Haven't gotten to that one, about halfway through the first one. It is absolutely fascinating. I love reading about the history of radio in particular. Lilith Demonius of Salisbury Hill. That's another great example of a song where you can even hear him explain what the song is about, Peter Gabriel. And he talked about how he wrote that during a time of his life. That's when he left Genesis and decided to, go on his own. And it's an amazing song, but does it appeal to you because it's an amazing song? Does it appeal to you because it actually is relating to you somehow? And it may or may not. It doesn't need to. That's a thing. So Salisbury Hills one also. I've seen him live in concert, and there's a great video that I think he put together, as people did, where he has clips from shows from his entire career when he's a young man on stage, first solo, and then currently with his current band. And they've got, I think, 5 different shows where they spliced together the chunks of Salisbury Hill. And check it out. It's on YouTube. Check it out. It's amazing. Beth Humphreys. One of my favorite songs by J.J. Cale says, I want to love you, baby, and keep my other baby too. How am I supposed to like that sentiment? But such a great song. Oh. Earthbound Misfit Help by the Beatles is the perfect song. Supplanter says the song Turn It On Again by Genesis has a 13/8 time signature. And check out Rick Beato. He's got a video like the top 10 or top 20 songs with unusual time signatures. And it's fascinating. It's fascinating. It absolutely is. Lucky Leprechaun, do you have a publicly accessible song playlist on any music platforms? No, I do not. I don't think so. No, I don't. No. The Richard, Deep Blue Something, Breakfast at Tiffany's is so glorious. I did find them and hook up. They're rather gothy. That song is so amazing, though. And another, again, I actually briefly worked at a radio station that played that song. I was a top 40 DJ for a brief period of time as a lawyer. It's another story for another day. I'll probably do a Vault video about it somewhere. So, yeah, Lowell Riggs says Susie Quattro did really well in Europe, but was only seen here doing a duet on Happy Days. And that's one of those things where she was much bigger over there than here. And it's just that things happen. Earthbound Misfit, the best line ever in a country song is, I know where you parked your house. Oh, boy. One of my favorite songs, although I don't think it's considered country by country musician fans, but the song by Rehab called The Bartender Song is a great song. I love that song. It's a fabulous song. And again, I believe a one-hit wonder. Cyberdoc Rick Beato is a music beast. Dude has vast knowledge and mad stories. I agree. One of my fantasies in life is to sit in his studio and go with him and say, Rick, okay, I'm gonna give you 5 songs that you will think are the dumbest songs ever. let's discuss them. Number 1, Charlene, I've never been to me. And go through the list and just see what he says. I mean, I tell him in advance, this is what we're talking about. Oh boy. Hey Steve, where's the WRIF sticker? Big John. Unfortunately, I can see it. It's right there. It's in that pile of stickers. I was putting together the backdrop. I got it close, and then I kind of stopped. So I had more than I got to put up eventually. Smoke and Louie. My time in talk radio in Cincinnati was all legalized cannabis related. The music was. Oh yeah, because I got high. I was gonna clean my room, but I got high. That's a great song, also. What's amazing about that song, if you hear that song, the song, all these things I would have done, but I got high. It's a fabulous song. It's catchy. It's got a hook. It's got a certain logical consistency to it as the story plays out. And it's actually got a very cool like moral to the story, right? And yet, because of the topic and it's at best considered to be like kind of shoddy production values, it didn't get a lot of airplay. Also, the subject matter, but it is such a great song, and it's listenable. It's catchy. It's catchy. Lucky Leprechaun, Wonderwall by Oasis. One thing that Americans like me don't understand is that Oasis was huge, huge in England, huge. I mean, they were like unbelievable, they were like a phenomenon. And it was one of those things where I was watching a documentary about them. I didn't realize how big they were because over here it's like, yeah, a couple songs, Damien T, we need to hear your DJ voice. You're hearing it right now. Most DJs actually don't change their voices or alter their voices on the air, and it's not good to. Although I've known a couple. Speaking of bad acts, there was a guy at the first radio station I worked at who would do this, and you could actually see him. I can't even do it. He'd lower his chin and talk like this. And couldn't you do that from up here? I go, I guess it does lower it. Okay, but still, I remember sitting outside the studio looking through the glass and going, "Huh, that's weird." So, Connor Thomas, any plans to retire as a lawyer? No, in fact, I know a lot of lawyers who simply keep working until they literally keel over one day. And it's not heavy lifting. I mean, let's just be honest here. So, I mean, if you said, Steve, you're digging ditches, are you going to stop anytime soon? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to stop like last week. But so Gilbert making a comment about ABBA with a yawn. I would tend to agree with you. I'm not a big ABBA fan. And I know that they were gigantic in Europe and they're pretty big in America. I just never, something about the music didn't do it for me. And it's just one of those things. If you like them, knock yourself out. If you want to go sing along at the musical, go ahead. Oh boy. Dom Beeps, the lyrics to Semi-Charmed Life. Pretty crazy. Can't believe how big it was on the radio. Third Eye Blind, of course, is a band that did that song. Let me tell you, I'm going to see them on July 7th at Pine Knob. I've seen them before. They put on a very good show. They had a couple big albums with a lot of good tracks on them. So the Richard, fun interactions with celebrities, radio or beyond. Not a lot. I can sum it all up for you. I've been backstage at a Van Halen concert. Didn't actually talk to any of the boys, but I did get within glaring distance of David Lee Roth. Him glaring at me, not me at him. So I've met Alice Cooper at a bar in New York City. Walked up talking about Detroit for about 20 minutes. Really nice guy. Really nice guy. I met Richard Petty. I interviewed him for a documentary, but the footage hasn't been used yet. Really nice guy. Spent about an hour and a half with him. Just a really nice guy. And I'm trying to think who else I've met. I've met a bunch of people in NASCAR. Buddy Baker, Charlie Glotzback, people like that. But no other celebrities that I can think of. But that's, yeah. So in radio, you don't often meet that many unless bands come by the radio station. I never worked at any radio station that had any big bands show up. Most of them were bands that would show up and then go lip sync at the local bar. Greg is Sander for Music Guy here. Steve, keep up the good work. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Mantis Toboggan, Parliament Funkadelic. One thing I'll tell you about them, I believe, is the band where I was watching them on like Austin City Limits, and they had like 300 people on stage. I mean, it was... You start to appreciate ZZ Top for having 3 people on stage. When you see a band or a ska band, there was an Onion headline one day where it goes, ska band outnumbers audience. It was a reflection on both how big the bands were and how small the audiences were. Oh, Jay Klein points out Jay Leno technically is a celebrity. Yes, he is. And I saw him just this past December. So, and I'll probably see him again. Somebody asked earlier about the Woodward Dream Cruise. He came to Dream Cruise last year, and I saw him there also. Frederick Spector, Jay Leno. Yes, so there you go. Chuck Whitehead, I got my picture with Richard Petty. So did I. Very, very cool guy. DePaul, I once met Henry Winkler on the New York City subway. I saw Henry Winkler from a distance at the Autorama 2 years ago, and he was wearing like a powder blue cardigan, about the color of that blue in that license plate. And he just looks like a college professor now. And I am of the age that Happy Days was one of the must-see shows among my crowd. And so you go to school the next day, hey, sit on it, to see him now. I'm not knocking him. We all grow up, right? It was just kind of interesting. Members only rocks. I met Tony Bennett in an elevator in Cupertino. Very nice and polite. Mantis Toboggan, salute to you, Jay. And Jay said that's Dr. Mantis Toboggan. Burning Sensation Ska was that UB40 outnumbering the crowd. And don't forget about Ellie Campbell, the lead singer from UB40. He's done some really cool solo stuff. UB40, of course, is the band that had a bunch of hits back in the day, including like a version of Red Red Wine, which drove me nuts. I couldn't stand that song. But again, if you liked it, that's great. That's great. Red Fox Mad, do you know Tim Allen? No, but interestingly, Tim Allen went to grew up in the Birmingham area, Birmingham, Michigan. He had some legal troubles here too, by the way. But do not know him. I'm pretty sure he's based in California now. But I know he collects cars. He's got a car collection, not quite as big as Jay Leno's, but this isn't a competition. I've seen some videos shot out at his garage where he's let people come in and take a look at them. And he's got a real interesting eclectic mix also. Cyberdoc, we watch Arthur Fonzarelli, Richie Cunningham, Ralph Melf, and the other guy every day. Potsy, Anson Williams. What's funny about Happy Days is that, don't forget Richie Cunningham, of course, had been working in TV for a long time with like Andy Griffith and so on, Ron Howard. And so he's got this long background in television. So they come up with this idea for a show called Happy Days. And the first person they cast is Ron Howard is going to be the clear-cut, clean-cut, typical Midwestern American kid surrounded by these other people. And very early on, I've seen all kinds of interviews about this, so I'm pretty sure this is relatively true. Pretty early on, the producers realized that while Richie's a nice guy and likable, people loved Fonzie. And they actually wanted to change the name of the show to possibly calling it Fonzie's Happy Days. And Richie Cunningham, Ron Howard, had been in Hollywood for so long that his agent had it written into his contract that they couldn't change the name of the show without his permission. And so they went to Ron Howard and said, do you mind if we change the name of the show to Arthur Fonzarelli's or Fonzie's Happy Days? And he goes, yes, I do. Don't. And it worked just as well calling it Happy Days. But Fonzie became a major character until he jumped the shark. Blade Man 7, Rat into Kitchen. What am I going to do? Cyberdoc, who remembers Lenny and Squiggy? Well, don't forget that Happy Days spun off all kinds of stuff. So Joni Loves Chachi, Laverne and Shirley, and then, of course, Mork and Mindy was a spinoff of Happy Days. A show about a space alien living in America was a spinoff of huh? And I've seen, is it Gary Marshall? I've seen him try to explain that. And I don't care what he says. It made no sense. It made no sense. Lucky Leprechaun says, I told Tommy Lee Jones, good morning, Mr. Jones. As he left a grocery store, he grumbled, good morning back. Don't get me wrong. I understand that some famous people are sick and tired of people running up to them and hugging them and kissing them and stealing their wallets, whatever. That they don't want to deal with weirdos. But if you simply say hello in a polite fashion and let them know you recognize them, that shouldn't be that big of a deal. But maybe he thought, well, hey, I grumbled good morning back. That's good enough. Dum Dum says James Hetfield has a really nice car collection also. I did not know that. Wouldn't surprise me, though. Avenging Emma Peel says Paul Newman used to come to Summit Point Raceway to drive and stay in our town one state over. Very nice guy. Nice kids. Never met his wife. I've heard that about Paul Newman. Especially when it came to people in the racing community, because he took that very seriously. Have you ever met Danny DeVito? Asks J, the letter J. No, I have not. No, I have not. Bill Ream, when you talk to Leno, does he ask you when your brother's going to get his car done? No. Jay calls my brother and goes, when are you going to get my car done? Damien T. American Graffiti is one of the greatest movies ever made. I just watched it again about a month ago. It's great. It just shows you a simple little story, slice of life, shot on a relatively small budget. It hangs together very well. It had a great cast of characters. So many little subplots going on. I love that movie, every bit of it, and it's great. So, Doug Wallace reminds us, of course, Joni loves Chachi. Marvin Kortemeyer says I was at a panel with William Shatner and got to ask him about the Twilight Zone episodes. And that's one of those interesting things is that, of course, he wasn't just in Star Trek for the older folks out there. And the younger folks, he wasn't just in the newer stuff. And the first, at least the oldest stuff I think I've seen him in is Twilight Zone episodes. And some of them was he the one on board the airplane who kept seeing stuff out the window? And then also when he goes to a diner and there's a fortune telling thing on the desk and you put a penny and it pops out a card and you ask it questions. And just so happens he starts asking weirder, and starts getting stranger and stranger answers. But he did really well on those things. Now I always thought he was a bit overacting in Star Trek, but that could also just be the style. The Richard says, I really dig your vibe. Is there anything you might like to pursue creatively? Maybe a collaboration with an idol asking for a friend. There's all kinds of people I love to do collaborations with, but I don't normally do collaborations on my channel. But I would love to, like I said, I'd love to sit down with Rick Beato and talk one-hit wonders. I'd like to talk to Phil from the Wings of Pegasus about one-hit wonders. I've corresponded with him a little bit also, the guy who does the analysis of a lot of musicians. He's from England, and his name is Phil, and he's from a band called Pegasus, and his Wings of Pegasus. And his channel is called Phil from Wings of Pegasus. And he's just a fascinating guy. But he's over there, I'm over here, so that might not happen. But occasionally I do get asked by people if I'll come on their show. And I always often say, well, if I can fit it in, you don't mind it looking like this, I'll do it. But it also depends on the time and so on. Standard deviation is terror at 20,000 feet is the episode. And Corbo the Wise says Shatner was in the Gremlin episode. I think it was. He kept seeing stuff out the window. Yes. And Cold Lake Alta says Harrison Ford is nearly unrecognizable in American Graffiti. That is true. And by the way, I'm saying that because I actually was reading an article recently about Harrison Ford being in Star Wars. And then they mentioned the fact that he's in American Graffiti. And I'm like, wait, that's right, he was. Oh. Raito says Phil with an exclamation mark. Sixter01 says, check out two-lane blacktop. James Taylor was the driver of a 55 gasser racing a GTO for pink slips. I know people. I know people in the old days would pull up next to you at a light go, want to race for pink slips? The first thing you go is, well, in Michigan, it's green, dude. Don't you know that? Well, yeah, but if I said, do you want to race for green? Well, dude, you want to race for titles? Maybe? I don't know. But does anybody actually do that? The Richards says, Phil and I know each other. That's rather interesting. Dreams do come true. Boyd the Goofball says, Steve, you ever attended the Back to the 50s car show at the Minnesota State Fairgrounds? No, I have not. So many cars, you could walk all day and not see them all. Over 10,000. Parking is well organized. Huh. I appreciate it. I've never heard of it. Bernadine Sackinger says William Shatner was in judgment at Nuremberg. Was he really? Wow, I did not know that either. Raito says Phil looks like every guy I went to high school with. Chuck Whitehead says every time you watch Gunsmoke, you're like, I've seen him on other shows. Cute Bug talked to Carole King in the doctor's office. She was sweet. The question is, did you ask her what she was in for? That would be impolite. Hang on. I always forget I've got a water bottle right here. Gilbert says, Steve, Tim Allen went to Seaholm. I wasn't sure it was Seaholm or Groves, but those are both the Birmingham schools. Because I know that he lived over by the Water Tower Park in Beverly Hills, Michigan. I always forget whether that's Seaholm or Groves. Michael Lawless says, I enjoyed your Rick Gore collaboration. That was years ago. Big John, did you ever hang out with Drew and Mike? No, I never met them. Never met them. David K says Harrison Ford is also in Apocalypse Now. Yes, he's sitting at the table where they're all eating those really gross shrimp things. And the high-ranking officer says, hey, I know it looks disgusting, but try it. It's good. Something to that effect. And then, of course, Martin Sheen has got to, he's asked, we understand that you worked on this such and such operation. And Martin Sheen goes, well, if I had, I wouldn't be at liberty to tell you. And then they said, well, we need you to take care of this guy upriver a little bit. And by take care of, we mean with prejudice. Earthbound Misfit, Shatner's the only person to try a spoken word version of a rap song. Some of Shatner's stuff. And also, don't forget that Leonard Nimoy, I believe, also put out a couple albums of music. And I say music as in music. Daw 764, Opinion of 12 Angry Men. You know, it's been so long since I've seen it. I can't speak to the movie. I read the play, and I thought it was kind of, but I mean, it's drama, you know. So, Neuropilot says Harrison Ford is a decent pilot, despite an occasional oops, flown a bunch of different aircraft, jets, and helicopters. Don't forget, he's also in that horrible movie, 7 days and 8 nights, or 6 nights and 8 days, or whatever it was, with that woman whose name is escaping me right now, who passed away recently. And in that movie, he plays a pilot, strangely enough. But I saw that movie not so long ago on cable. Yeah, it's still not that good. Michael Law says you go to a car show like that for the well-organized parking. Landshas, first-time live show attendee. Damien T, isn't there a famous auction in Nebraska every year where they sell really old cars for restoration projects? I could swear Jay would go to those. I do know he buys cars at auction quite a bit, but he often sends people, because if somebody sees Jay in the audience, they go, oh, he's going to bid in the car. It means we can count on the price getting jacked up. And so he would send somebody to do the work for him. But I've seen him attending shows. I know a couple of years ago he popped up at I'm drinking a mental blank. The one in England, the driveway at the race course, the Goodwood Festival of Speed. I know that he was walking around out there one year. And the funny thing is, I've seen him walking around. People walk up and start talking to him. They'll talk to him. Yeah, Ann Heche, DAW 764W. Ann Heche is the one who was in the movie with Harrison Ford. Jay Klein, also Ann Heche, although he spelled it correctly. Burning Sensations says Harrison played a bomber pilot in a World War II movie. I was not aware of that, unless, but you never know. 6 days, 7 nights, 1998, Harrison Ford, comedy/adventure, Jay Dixon informs us. Janice Ellery says Shatner is still alive at 93. 93. Lowell Riggs, I like watching the movies Airplane and Airplane 2. I saw Airplane yesterday. I was flipping around the channels. I had to pause for a second. I left it there. We've got to get to a hospital. A hospital? What is it? It's a big building full of sick people, but that's not important now. When can we land? I can't tell you. You can tell me. I'm a doctor. 4 hours. We can't land for 4 hours? You can't tell me for 4 hours. I could watch it all day long. Dead Dog Rising. Good afternoon, Steve. Longtime listener, first-time caller. Thank you very much. Connor Thomas. No, I've not been to the Auburn Cord Duesenberg car show or museum in Indiana. I need to go. I've driven past it a few times, never stopped. I need to make a special trip. Vince Roberts. Hey, Steve, from Unicoi, Tennessee. Sam as I am says that the question is, what would William Shatner's last words be if he got to pick them? Would he be complaining about tribbles, or the Gorn. Do you like gladiator movies? My dad says you don't like to play defense. Autopilot, non-entered. That's right around the same. That's right around one of the scenes I checked in on. Oh boy, Burl Osborne, when you coming back to Geneva Radio? You know, I haven't talked to those guys in a while. I should call them back up. See, they'll let me come in. Leonard Nimoy's famous song from the car and Zen, "The Ballad of Bilbo Baggins." The Richard says, "Who is Cletus Tout?" A all-star cast with Christian Slater and Richard Dreyfuss. And even RuPaul is close to being Tarantino. I highly recommend it. I'll check it out. Christian Slater was in a movie called Cuffs, and why my brain remembers things like this, I don't know. The movie was horrible, but it had one visual gag that was so funny. I think they put it in the trailer, where he's in a fight with somebody. He's supposedly a police officer of some sort. He's in a fight with somebody in a bedroom of a house, and the other person picks something up they're going to throw at him, and he picks up a lamp, and he throws it at them, and as it gets the end of its cord, it goes pink, and it falls to the ground, and it just misses the guy because the cord wasn't long enough. Chris B. Canada says, I bet Shatner's headstone will say, beam me up. Oh, boy. Michael Lawless is buying a used Canadian car from a U.S. dealership problematic. Not if it's got a good, clean U.S. title. A lot of vehicles get brought over, and for the most part, they're pretty similar. You got to make sure that the odometer head is in miles. But nowadays, I don't think that's that big of a deal. In the old days, as you might know from watching, like, I don't know, Rain Man, switching the speedometer odometer head could be quite difficult to do. USC champion 2007. Did you ever see Kentucky Fried Movie or The Groove Tube? Of course I did. Catholic schoolgirls in trouble. And I actually saw it at the drive-in. Hey, is Gilbert still around? There used to be a drive-in out that way also. Forgot which one it was, but it was a little bit to the west. And I saw that at the drive-in, Groove Tube and Kentucky Fried Movie. Janice Ellery, I once met Peter Frampton. I didn't recognize him. Is that because he didn't look like the cover of Frampton Comes Alive? Burning Sensation says Harrison as a bomber pilot was in the movie Hanover Street. Hanover Street. Land Shas says, Steve, I bought a new Toyota back in 2021 with a feature I can't use unless I pay a monthly fee, and another two features that I'm blocked from using even if I pay. Are you interested in the details? Yeah, send me an email. I'd like to see that. I'm just curious. I mean, I've heard of these things, but I've never met anybody who actually had one. Caucasian Sasquatch says cuffs. Been a long time since I thought of that one. Ron Valley says Scotty Kilmer says to never buy a used car from a used car dealer. Well, he's right because the profit margins are gigantic and they're so protected legally, and they almost never know anything about the cars. And so it's like the worst of all three worlds. But don't forget that also Scotty Kilmer claims that every car ever made is the worst car ever made. I mean, so Gilbert's is Commerce. That's what the drive-in was. I think there's still something there, like remains of the drive-in. Like, I don't know if the screen is there or maybe the pillars, but I'm pretty sure that's where I saw Kentucky Fried Movie and the other one, Groove Tube. And that would have been about 1978. And I mentioned before that the first car I bought with my own money was a 69 Dodge Charger. But before that, I got to drive the green Gremlin that my mother had. 74 or something. Piece of garbage. And I remember seeing the movie, Kentucky Fried Movie, at the drive-in movie theater in the Gremlin. So, you know, we'll move on. John Laurie, have you seen Plan 9 from Outer Space? Oh, yeah, many times. I've even seen it on Mystery Science Theater, which they do a great job of sending that one up. That one didn't take a lot of work, though. Litigator says Scotty doesn't say it about the Celica, but isn't it true that more than once he's claimed like some cars don't ever buy this car, don't ever buy that car? Don't it just seems to be a theme. I just read his thumbnails. So Haggerty and Commerce Roads. I worked at the gas station next door. You wrote I work. I assume you mean worked. You don't still work there, do you? Cuz 63 says out on a ski lift with Emilio Estevez and Paula Abdul in Taos, New Mexico. Both are very short but great skiers. Oh boy. Standard deviation gremlin, a real chick magnet, eh? You know what's funny is you go through phases in life when you're 15 years old and you're about to get your permit. Anything that rolls, you'll take, right? But of course, all that it takes is you to show up one day in school in the green gremlin, and some kid who is given a brand new Trans Am for his birthday pulls in next to you, and you're like, okay, we've got to do something about this. So, oh, Woody stems. Will criminal copyright and trademark laws ever be enforced as opposed to the civil system? I think they are occasionally, but it usually takes a big actor. I'm talking about a big entity. Like if some movie company proved that some company was infringing their copyrights to such an extent that they want to enforce that warning label at the beginning of the movie, they could probably get someone in Washington to do it, but the average person would probably never get arrested for it. Connor Thomas, is it better to buy a new car for lemon protection or a couple-year-old one at a lower cost? That's a tough call because, you know, if you're going to buy a car that's like 6 months old but used, I'd say screw that and get the new car. But a couple years old, you won't have lemon law protection, but you're probably going to get a gigantic discount, right? Steam, have you visited Marvin's Marvelous Mechanical Museum out there on Orchard Lake Road? No, I have not. And I understand it's going away. Sadly, they're going to build something else in that spot. Ron Klotzer says hello to Steve, the mods, the chat from the middle of the effing hot Mojave Desert. Mark Miller, 16 years old, 72 Maverick, but at least I had wheels. Bob Loblaw says Andy Griffith, a face in the crowd is terrifying if you consider current events. And you know, it's funny, it's been a while since I've seen that, and it's so strange to see Andy Griffith in a role with no laugh track being serious. Oh, Gilbert, I took my brother's MG. He was at college. The MG, especially if it was one of them convertibles, those things, I don't know, they just seem dangerous to me. They're so small. So, Sam, as I am, says he drove a previously unseen AMC Pacer into Manhattan on a Friday night in the 70s, and crowds came off movie lines to ask what it was because it looked like an upside-down goldfish bowl. And by the way, Jess, I'm not making this up. My mom stopped driving the Gremlin, so she bought a Pacer. So I got to drive the Gremlin to school and back for a little while. So standard deviations, I got a hold of my brother's old Ford Pinto, the best street legal go-kart ever. There were a bunch of cars back then, Pintos, Vegas, Gremlins. You could buy them really, really cheap. And if you took decent care of them, they'd run for a good amount of time. Now, I wouldn't have driven my Gremlin cross country and been confident in it. But to and from school, not all day long, not a problem. Terrell Cockrum says, I watched a video the other day on the Tucker convertible. Yeah. I have a book that I wrote about the Tucker automobile, and there's no mention in there, I don't think, of a convertible. It's the strangest thing. And the Tucker community has almost unanimously said there was no such thing as a Tucker convertible being built at the factory. And I'm actually very familiar with the story, but I hate to get too involved in it, only because all it's going to probably do is get me sued or something. Gilbert says the Cosworth Vega. Yeah, there you go. Put the most complicated engine you can into the cheapest thing you build. Cosworth Vega. Ruger's Last Resort says Vega with an LS6. I was always curious if you could take one of those like little Dodge Chargers from the 80s and wedge in a Hemi. I always wondered if you could do it. I'd like to see someone actually break out the tape measure and see, because that would have been cool to take the monster engine and stick it in something that tiny. Sad Tiger says my first car was a convertible Dodge, I think 77. I would drive all summer with the top off in a bikini blasting Alice in Chains. Now, here's the thing. I don't want to make any judgments about what gender or sex you are, but it could be either very interesting or kind of weird. Um, Van Street, I drove a Pinto wagon from Portland to New York City, except for a few mountains. It was fine. Oh, boy. Rye Toast had a friend who drove a Yugo. I'm not sure I ever actually saw a Yugo in real life. I may have seen them like at a car show or something, but Drag Pack Mercs says I was in a court a few years ago when the U.S. attorney was prosecuting some guys that were wholesale copying and selling DVDs. It does happen. I thought it did, but it's not that it's going to happen a lot. But more often than not, when they find out people are doing it, what they'll do is they'll pick a few people and sue them just to get the message across. And then they'll wait on it for a little while. Scott Woodford checks in saying, happy Sunday. I work in a fraud department at the bank. I'll tell you right now, there's a couple different rabbit holes I go down on YouTube. Last week, I went down a whole bunch. Apparently, there's this new thing, and it's not new, but it's been getting worse and more out of control in Florida in particular, where the operators will go out and find somebody who looks down on their luck and says, hey, how do you want to make a couple $1,000 in cash for like an hour's worth of work? And they go, oh, yeah, what do we do? Let me take your picture. They take the person's picture, they make a fake ID. Then they say, you're going to walk into this bank and claim that you're this person and you want to withdraw some money because you've got an account at the bank. And they've stolen the banking information about somebody. And then they get like some bum off the street to walk into the bank with a fake ID to take the money out. And I've seen dozens of these on YouTube where the cops get called and they point out and they go, that person right there. And they, excuse me, let's see the ID. The ID is bad. And they go, what's your real name? And I saw one guy almost immediately go, oh, I've got a drug problem. Like I've got a drug problem. And I saw another woman who stuck to her guns for like an hour. No, that's me. That's me. And they're like, what's your birthday? And she memorized the birthday. Okay, whatever. Where do you live? How long you live there? And then eventually she's like, am I going to go to jail? And they're like, yes. The Richard says, now I'm rather pissy. I thought I was thinking of gremlin or demon or monster. I saw it in Hawaii. I believe it was Aussie. I can't even find it in search. It's too vague. I need you. I'm not a big expert on Australian vehicles, but I can tell you there's a lot of them where even companies like GM, Ford, and Chrysler put out vehicles in Australia on different platforms with different names that look completely different. They might have an engine we'd recognize, but so I don't know that much about that. Les Brooks is the first Monzas on the Vega chassis had to remove the engine to change the spark plugs. I remember there was a Corvette. You had to drop the exhaust manifold to get at least at one of them. So sometimes they don't think that stuff through very well. Grubby old Patriots, I had a Shelby Charger Omni. We put a 440 auto and a Dana 60 in the rear. How fast would it go when you had traction? I'd love to know what the quarter mile times in that were. RBH HBR, was it the lady in Florida? Well, most of the ones I saw were all in Florida. I saw a whole bunch of them. Cyberdoc says, I was sent to the bad boy corner of chat. I'll chill. I didn't know we had a corner. I thought the room was round. Neuropilot says it's mainly clean or scrubbed pre-release movies, the type that are virtually not even released to reviewers. Les Brooks says the Aussies had a Hemi Slant 6. That's a mind blower for you. Don't forget, we had that weird Slant 6 that Chrysler bought, a 225, where they had that really weird intake manifold that looked like this. Carburetors over here, engines slanted like that. Things ran forever. Mark Sparks, can I sue a Nigerian prince for breach of promise and never got the money? No, he has sovereign immunity in Nigeria. Connor Thomas, what video has had the most backlash? I'm not really sure. There are a couple topics that I get pushback on, but we'll see. Janice Ellery, I'm ashamed to admit I live in Florida. Well, I mean, there's goofy people in every state. Don't forget that I, had to tell you the story about the Michigan man this past week who zoomed into a court hearing for driving while license suspended while behind the wheel of his car. So, Cyclone reminds me that yesterday I asked about the worst licensing law in America. Now they got rid of the Louisiana florist law. And he says, how about the one that Oregon Engineering Board says that doing math without a license is illegal? But I think they straightened that out, didn't they? Crispy in Canada says the Slant 6 lasted because it didn't make enough power to wear itself out. Couldn't get out of its own way. Luke Trust. Hey, Steve, should I buy an RV? No. Oh. Old Paint 71 says the bad part of the Slant 6 is where they placed the distributor. I don't remember. I never owned one. Forgot where that was. Was it someplace underneath that weird intake manifold? I've always thought that intake manifold looked almost like a weird like symbol from like a James Bond movie or something. Michael Lawless, do you think almost all courts should be live streamed? I think they should be. I think that the more people see what happens in court, the better. One of the biggest problems I've got, I talk about elections, is upcoming election, you need to vote for a judge. People go, how do I know who to vote for? They go, you got to do some research. They go, oh, how do I do that? It's like, oh, actually, it's difficult. But if you could actually tune in and watch judges and go, I like that guy. Don't like that. Don't like her, but I like her. That would make things a lot easier. So I have to tell you, I did get somebody very, very angry about a week or two ago where I mentioned the Ninth Circuit Court doing something. And the guy goes, yeah, you make a video about it, but did you even vote in the last election for the Ninth Circuit? They're appointed for life. They're not elected. I stopped responding to comments like that because I thought to myself, if the guy doesn't know that federal judges are appointed, it's not going to help him if I say, yes, I voted in the last election, but just not for federal judges. Justin Knowlton, do you still practice law? Yes. In Michigan only, however. Corbo the Wise. How often do you get suggested court cases or articles you've already covered? Oh, all the time. And sometimes I'll write them back and say, I just did this. And they go, oh, I'm sorry. And I've actually gotten them like a month and a half later. And I'm like, I think I did this. And they go, oh, sorry, I didn't catch that. Tim G says, I don't have time. Tell me, what is 34 plus 49? No, see, I'm a busy man. I haven't got time to do math. And for the people who don't know, I've explained this before. There's a joke in a Simpsons episode involving the crazy Texan displaying a car at a county fair. And I think he claims it was Hitler's car. And he goes, some people even tell me that his body might be in the trunk, but I'm a busy man. I haven't got time to look. And my brothers and I turned that into, I'm a busy man. I haven't got time for anything. And so whenever somebody asks me about math or numbers, I haven't got time for that. CyberDocs' live streaming courts would be phenomenal. Well, they do that in some courts. There's some, Judge Middleton live streams all this stuff. But, Morgan Freese's required car inspections are pointless. I tend to agree. I knew somebody who lived in a state where inspections were required, and he had a friend who said, I can get any car to pass an inspection, just pay me. He wouldn't fix it. He would just give you the sticker and say, yeah, your car passed. You paid him. I mean, so. Gary Weisenberger says, Steve, we have a blind Supreme Court justice in Michigan. Of course we do. We've also had other judges who are blind on the bench. We had one in Bay City. We had one in Wayne County Circuit Court, Judge Paul Tyrannus. The one in Detroit was one of the best judges I was ever in front of. The one in Bay City shouldn't have been a lawyer, let alone a judge. But that's another story altogether. But yeah, Bernstein, Justice Bernstein, is visually handicapped, so visually disabled. Don McR says Texas is doing away with inspections, but you still have to pay the fee for some reason. Gee, I wonder why. Glenn Whistler, Steve Lehto live. I'm late. Yeah, I got news for you. I'm really sorry to tell you, but I've been here for 2 hours. We're about to end. So I'm just glancing through here for some last quick questions here. Howlin' Wolf, Steve, my favorite lawyer. Thank you. Brian Selta didn't agree with vehicle inspections until I moved to Cook County, Illinois. So many junk vehicles on the road. I've seen so many junk vehicles on the road everywhere, including Michigan. I wouldn't even know where to begin, but I'm still not going to call for inspections. If your car looks unsafe to drive, a police officer can pull you over and give you an equipment ticket and ask you to get whatever it is fixed. So what are you going to do? And Luke Truss goes, what book of yours should I start with? My most accessible book is probably American Murder Houses. That's the one that sold the most. I've written 2 car books that you can buy about the Chrysler Turbine car or the Tucker automobile. And then I've also written a book about the Italian Hall disaster called Death's Door. And I wrote a book about Timothy Masters, the man who was convicted of a crime he didn't commit, spent 10 years in prison, and then got out. Really, really nice guy, an amazing story. But that's going to wrap it up for me today right now. I apologize. We've been here for 2 hours. I didn't drink enough water. I'm starting to lose my voice again. I will see you guys this week, as I always do, on my channel. And next week, if all goes according to plan, let me check I still use a paper calendar. I'll check my calendar right here, and it looks like I will be around on Sunday. So we'll do another live stream Sunday. Until then, behave yourself.